Hello, Garland Nixon here with Latham Maroof. We've got a lot of things going on in the Middle East. We've got all of the drama around surrounding Israel's potential attack on Rafah, and of course, the Iranian foreign ministers doing some visits. So let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here with my dear friend Latham Maroof, who is live from Beirut, Lebanon. Yeah, we got lots to talk about in the Middle East, but I want to ask you before we go, brief, because we got to hit all of the West Asia stuff, but your thoughts on the Tucker Carlson interview. What about it in light of, what the media has turned into in the West, the information that has gotten out, the freak out over it from the usual suspects. What are your thoughts on that, Lath, as a veteran journalist?
I took the time to watch that 2.5 hours. I mean, I was floored, first off, to see an American interview that is not made into sound bites. This is what we're used to watching Western media, is that it's all full of sound bites. There's no context. And I think seeing how President Putin on purpose decided to control the interview in ways that open context to the viewers, it made it clear that Putin was determined to give the audience, specifically American audience that's coming to watch Tucker Carlson, the basics of history that they're denied the knowledge of. I mean, the first question, he took 35 minutes in answer, and laid out a history of over 1,000 years of Russia and what is now known as the Ukraine, to make it clear to the Western audience why Russia reacted this way to the encroachment on its border by NATO, and why the Russian people actually support these decisions of President Putin. I think, if the Western people in the U.S., in Europe, were given the basic knowledge of history and geography that most of us in the rest of the world have, then they would come to the same conclusions that we all come to, that the United States is imposing on humanity wars, as we see, and killing and what have you. So I thought it was a brilliant interview by President Putin, not by Tucker Carlson. Putin definitely took full advantage of this moment to reach those audience, and he managed to deliver on that.
The one thing I'll say, and I want your comment on this, here's what I picked up from it also. In light of the history of lies, of, agreeing not to move eastward in NATO and moving eastward, here's what I got from it. I'm fed up. I've had enough. You guys have lied to me over and over. Everything I try to make friends with you, and you spit in my face every time. I've had enough. And the reason I say that is because it seems to me that's the same thought or feeling in the Middle East, in West Asia, the resistance factors, etc. Everybody, even Hamas, the Palestinians, everybody, we've had enough of this. You people lied to us all the time. You're aggressive. That's the sentiment, whether it's Vladimir Putin, whether it's China, whether it's the resistance in West Asia. Everybody's had enough, and they're just not putting it up with it anymore.
Yes, and this is what now is leading much of humanity to not care, actually, what is the opinions in the West, because, no matter what you try, look at what's happening in the streets right now in the United States and Canada and Europe in terms of for Gaza. Millions of people out in the streets, survey after survey telling us that the populace in these countries are against the genocide, and they're being refused, political representation by their governments. And so what does this mean? It means for people in the East and the South that have thought that maybe even educating, like Putin did, educating the populace in the West, that it will have an effect, it's actually not having an effect. So now the only way you can deal with the West is to ignore them, not to negotiate with them, and to assert your sovereignty through force. That's the only way right now that is possible to achieve those goals for anybody in the South and the East. I think it's becoming also a very dangerous moment for the Western elite, seeing the detachment from the populace. I wonder if China, Russia, Iran, and of the countries in the South will start investing in this discontent that is in the West happening, and that, even without them investing in that discontent, we see already the results of that on the streets as we get closer and closer to election dates.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so let's get to a couple of things. Certainly, Rafah, that's the big story, but backstory. The Iranian foreign minister visiting Syria, visiting Lebanon, apparently talking with members of the resistance. I'm speculating that. Who knows why they're there? They could have been there for, a cup of tea and hummus for all I know. But your thoughts on what that means? Now, let me throw this out. I kind of think that they continually, the resistance forces continually evaluate what's going on the ground, evaluate what they're doing, evaluate what their next potential moves are. And that while some people say they're planning something big, I think they continually meet and evaluate and determine what the next path is. I don't think this is one big, okay, now here comes the big one. I think it's a continual intellectual discussion and process, evaluating what's going on the ground politically, physically, etc., and then saying, okay, we can do this, this, or this. I think they work together, that there's not one person that says, you all will, the U.S. says, oh, Iran just orders these around their vassals. They're projecting because the U.S. orders its vassals around. I think this is a collective effort, bringing in collective data, collective intelligence, and then determining based on all of that what direction to go. Anyway, Iranian foreign ministers is in the wind traveling. What does that mean, Laith?
Yeah, I mean, he came first to Beirut, the foreign minister Abdullahian of Iran, and he met with the official government, the foreign affairs minister, the prime minister, and then he met with the leadership of Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, the PLFP, and then moved on to Damascus and met with the president and the foreign affairs minister of Syria. And in all of these press conferences that were held with all these different factions that he met, it was clear that Iran and the axis of resistance are ready for a new stage in this war, in the situation that the Zionist colony attacks Rafah and commits a mass genocide that we haven't seen yet, at a scale that we haven't seen yet. So, we also, in his meeting in Syria during his press conference with the foreign affairs minister of Syria, we heard Syria say that they have fought multiple wars with the Israelis over the last 50 years, and that Syria is now ready and geared up for another war against the Zionist colony and to free the Golan Heights. And I want to connect this with what has been happening for the last week in the south of Lebanon. We saw that the Lebanese resistance, Hezbollah, has been targeting the Golan Heights extensively. We haven't seen that happen throughout this war for that much, but now it's almost on a daily basis. They destroyed practically all the Israeli bases in the Golan Heights, and this must have been now ringing alarms in the Israeli military, because in the case of an all-out war, the Golan Heights and the high position in the Golan Heights guarantees that the north of Palestine is covered. But it's clear from these actions now and the wars of the Syrian government that the Golan Heights will be liberated before the liberation of northern Palestine happens, to protect the forces coming from South Lebanon into North Palestine. This is now also over the last weeks since we had the last interview, the size of shells that are being used by the resistance in South Lebanon and the number of attacks have increased. And so currently, the area that we know as the Galilee Finger, it's like a panhandle that comes up between the Golan Heights and South Lebanon, is emptied of Israeli settlers. And if we think of it strategically, the Golan Heights will be liberated first, and then the panhandle will be taken. Otherwise, any invading force will be pounded from Israeli positions on the Golan Heights. So now we know that the axis of resistance is ready for a new stage, and that this new stage is connected to what's happening in Rafah and what the Israelis will do in their invasion there.
Wow. Your thoughts on where are we right now as far as how far Israel has gone regarding Rafah? I know they've done some bombing, some attacks. What to what level are they attacking Rafah, and what is the discussions about at what point where you say, okay, this is it, they have gone all out against Rafah, etc. Because I don't know. I see some bombs, I see pictures of people injured. Where are we?
Yeah, so we heard the Egyptian government threaten yesterday that if the Israelis invade Rafah, that the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt is null and void. We've seen, I don't know how, real this threat is. Of course, President Sisi is a vassal of the United States. But looking at the pressures mounting within the Egyptian military and the Egyptian populace, it's clear that Sisi will be put in a very bad situation, that he may need to react somehow. So we've seen movement of Egyptian tanks and air defenses towards the Rafah border. And so now this is on hold. We don't know how they will react in the case of an invasion. Over the last 2 days, the Israelis attacked multiple gatherings of refugees in Rafah, killing close to 300 people over the last 48 hours, much of them children. We saw the horrible images of the child hanging from the wall there with missing their limbs. It's tragic. Of course, the genocide continues at a different pace right now than it was before. But if the Israelis actually attack Rafah, which is very likely, then we will be seeing thousands of people dead in minutes, because it's more than 1.5 million people concentrated in an area of like 5 square kilometers or something. It's the most highly dense population now in the world, in this piece of land. I think it is very probable, like 90% probable, that the Israelis will attack Rafah. And I say this because looking at how the United States is giving the green light for it, the West is not standing against this, and so we should expect it to happen. The Israelis have lost all the battles on the ground, have not achieved any of their strategic military goals, so they will continue. Otherwise, they will look like they're defeated. And, this will open the doors of hell in the whole region.
Give me what do you think? What are some of the things you think happen as a result of if they attack Rafah and we see the kind of carnage that would obviously happen? Or if they just say, if they attack Rafah, when you say the gates of hell, give me an example of some of the potential, worst case type scenario. Not worst case, but the things. Well, this is what is going to happen as far as, I don't know, attacks on U.S. bases, whatever the case may be. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the first thing that will happen is the liberation of the Golan Heights, and then a invasion of northern Palestine by Hezbollah, by the Radwan Special Forces. And this, may sound, like a dream or something, but we are right now in a in a world that is a nightmare. So dreams are actually the only thing that's going to get us out of nightmares. But this is going to happen. There's no doubt about it. If the Israelis invade Rafah, there will be an invasion of the Golan Heights and northern Palestine. Missiles will be flying from, Iraq on American positions to distract them from supporting the Zionist forces. And Yemen definitely will be increasing its attacks on American ships and British ships in the region. The biggest the thing that I can't predict is what will Egypt do, and what will Jordan do. We saw the King of Jordan and his wife meeting with President Biden and the First Lady yesterday, and looking at the language that the king used, it's clear that there is a disagreement with the United States, and he warned that attack on Gaza and an expulsion of the Palestinian population will not be just pass with no response. So and over the last week, there's been at least 4 or 5 demonstrations going down to the border with Palestine from Jordan. Thousands of Jordanians try to block the path of supplies coming from the United Arab Emirates through Saudi Arabia to Jordan. That this caravan kind of convoy line that the Israelis and their allies in the region made to replace the sea route that Ansarullah blocked. And so, and over those, every time the demonstrations happened, there was clashes between the Jordanian military, Jordanian police forces, and their citizens. And they rounded over the week much of the leadership of the demonstrations in Jordan, Jordanian special forces, and have now disappeared them. So things are boiling inside Jordan. Things are boiling inside Egypt. An attack on Rafah will mean even these countries may have no choice but to join a war against the Zionist colony, even if it's just symbolic to appease their own populations. And if they do that, then things are going to be totally out of control.
Now, let me ask you this, because it appears to me that the populations throughout the Middle East, the Arab populations, are not aligned with their leaders, shall we say. Their leaders are trying to show as much constraint, trying to continue to hold on to their connections to the West, and the populations are in fury. That there's a potential for destabilization of many governments. There's a potential for some governments to fall. I think there's a potential. Here's what I think too, that there are some Muslim military leaders and militaries who will say at some point, we're not listening to the leaders anymore. That's what I think at some point, that there's actual military that say, we are this is our people, and if our leader says no, might hang him, whatever. But they're military factions that may attack. What kind of destabilization could we be looking at in some of these countries where the people are so infuriated? This Rafah's the red line, they can't take it anymore, and the leaders are unable to restrain them, or still attempt to restrain them. Do you think I don't know. Well, anyway, you go ahead. Your thoughts.
Yeah, I think this is the most probable in Egypt. Egypt is a society where the military is a core decider in it. Leadership has traditionally came from the military. And, I think given that the historical position of this military in terms of the wars that were fought for the liberation of Palestine in 1956, 67, 73. This is probably where a rebellion in a military could happen. Jordan, I don't know. Jordan, or their military is is all kind of infiltrated and led by British and American generals. In Jordan, the threat for the state is from the tribes. The tribal reality of Jordan makes it hard to control by government or military. And we've seen, multiple revolts over the last 20 years of the tribes on the border with Palestine and in the south. Practically, the government of Jordan really just controls the city of Amman. It's the rest is desert, and it's hard to control the tribes. They're very far from the center of power. So in those two countries, that's where the danger of rebellion comes from. The rest of the Gulf, the Gulf countries, they've been docile for now 80 years. The population of Saudi Arabia has been beaten to pulp by the Wahhabi cult and the kind of masculinized, So, the change in those countries will come only after the liberation of Palestine and the expulsion of American troops. These countries in the Gulf will, as long as the American troops are there, are gonna stay as they are. But I don't see them joining a war with that. So, but we don't need them to join a war of liberation of Palestine to actually have the liberation of Palestine happening. Not even Egypt joining will be needed in this coming days. If a war starts on a full scale between Lebanon and the Zionists, it's game over for the Zionist colony, and only a direct American intervention in Lebanon and Syria against the liberation of Palestine will delay the end of the Zionist colony.
Now, let me ask you this. Then what happens? What happens if Israel picks this fight, starts getting its nose bloodied, and the U.S. comes in and they're attacking and they're bombing, and basically it becomes the U.S. and Israel versus the resistance versus the Muslims? What happens? What does that expand it? What happens at that point if the U.S. and Israel now viewed as they're at war with the resistance?
Yeah, I think we will have another round of 4 months war that is on a regional scale, but that does not include Iran as a battle zone. So the United States will not open that fight yet, and Iran will not directly involve itself yet. What we will see is a clash between the United States against the non-state actors that are part of the axis of resistance, as we see right now, the United States bombing Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. But it will expand and grow in intensity, and it will include Lebanon. Up until now, the West has been refusing to join the Israeli battle against Hezbollah in Lebanon because they wanted to keep Lebanon as a kind of outside the formula of full-scale war. But once it happens, what we will see is, of course, attacks on all American bases in the region by the axis of resistance, and it wouldn't be just destruction of equipment, as right now the axis of resistance is purposefully not killing American soldiers, or at least we're not hearing about the killings. The United States is denying those killings also. So everybody's trying to not make it a full confrontation. But once this war opens up, it's going to be a full confrontation, and the United States and Israel and other vessels in Europe will fight this war with the axis of resistance components, except Iran, for 4 months at least, in the hopes that they can defeat those components without going directly to Iran. But they will lose tens of thousands of soldiers and contractors, and they will, as we get closer to the election in the United States, Biden and his administration will have no choice but to go to war with Iran in order to, hopefully for themselves, win an election in the United States on that ticket. Before that, we will not see a war with Iran.
Yeah, I don't think Biden's people have a chance from what I'm hearing. Right now, not a prayer. In the United States, not a prayer at this point, because pretty much they've lost Black America. Black folks have had it with them. And without Black votes, the Democratic Party doesn't exist. It's gone. It wins nothing. And I mean, in the Black community, it's thumbs down in a way that I've never seen before. They've had enough. Like so many people, they've had enough.
Just reminded me of something, because this is happening also in the Arabic and Muslim communities.
Yes.
Of the United States, and in Michigan specifically, and Detroit as a city. I mean, right now I was reading, and I don't know if this is being covered in the United States or not, but there is delegates within the Electoral College in Michigan that are Arabic. The mayor of Detroit, of Dearborn, the mayor of Detroit. So these are, and they are saying that when the delegate vote comes, they will refuse to give their delegate votes to Biden. This will create a first time in history of the United States that electoral college votes are not given to either of the presidential candidates, and it will lead to a second round of election. It never happened in the history of the United States. So can you imagine right now that if actually Black delegates in these electoral colleges, Arabic and Muslim delegates, Latino delegates, indigenous delegates, all refuse to give their vote to either Trump or Biden? What chaos will ensue in the United States, and will actually a second election round happen, or will we have a suspension of civil liberties and martial law implemented? These are all things that are realities that could happen, and it all depends on how much the United States leadership wants to invest in genocide and not back down from supporting the Zionist colony.
Well, what's interesting, people are in the chat. Some people said, oh, no, Black people are still going to vote for him. Oh, no, that's wishful thinking. What they don't understand is this. It, like so many other things, what I'm talking about is hearing people in the working class community. Right. You can listen to those who are on TV and all these people. They're all sold out. You know what I mean? They're making their money. They're powerful. They're trying to play the game because they benefit off of it. I'm talking about the everyday working class people. What I'm saying is I'm hearing things I've never heard before in my life. You know what I mean? I'm hearing I'm done. I'm hearing people who in 2020 said to me personally, you got to vote for Biden. You got to do the right thing. We've got to stop Trump. Say, I'm done. Finished. That's over. Biden's the word. From one thing to the next. I mean, on and on and on. Never heard this in the working class Black community on the level, which means if they stay home. But Trump now in the swing states, Trump's getting 20% of the Black vote, and not that it's in their favor of Trump or whatever. I think there's anger. There's I'm sick of my money going to Ukraine and this and that, when in my community people have nothing and there's homelessness and crime and all that. I'm hearing all of these things that make sense from a voter. That I've had enough. From what I see now, a lot of people going to stay home and rake leaves. And if the Black people don't show up they got to show up normally they show up in this big block. Just part of that block falls off. They're wiped out. A huge part of that block is falling off. Now, let me ask you this. Because one thing that will affect Americans, economic pain. Let's say Rafah is attacked and this war kind of starts going, ballistic here, going really, really bad, it's spreading, etc. At that point, what happens to the oil? What happens to the oil traffic? What happens to the oil commerce? How does that affect the ability and the price of oil and all that stuff, which that's what Americans will really wake up and say, what the hell? I'm paying $12 a gallon for gas. That's when they all are standing in front of the White House with the pitchforks. I know America. There's a lot they can get away with. Americans drive their cars, their boats, and whatever, and their lawnmowers. Americans are gas people. Man, when those prices go through the roof, that's when the shoe, I will guarantee you at that point, every politician will be scared to death because they'll know the people will go ballistic. Anyway, your thoughts on how a potential flare-up here with the Rafah attack would affect the ability of the Gulf states and the oil commerce?
You know, last week there was a statement put out by the King of Saudi Arabia that nobody has seen for a year, by the way, the King of Saudi Arabia in public. Right. But he put a statement out and he said there will be no normalization with Israel or peace with it, with Saudi Arabia, until the creation of a Palestinian state on all the territories of 1967 with its capital as Eastern Jerusalem. So now this is a done deal. But that, that tells you the pressure that is mounting in the streets of Saudi Arabia. They did a survey last 2 weeks ago of the population in Saudi Arabia by a Western survey company. It said 98% of the citizens of Saudi Arabia want the liberation of all of Palestine. So, how much can the elite in Saudi Arabia stay in line with the Americans? How much can they put out statements that are pro-Palestinian while they're working with Israel? How long can they do that? It's becoming very unattainable, right? So let's go into this possibility of a regional big war, and now the Saudi elite will have a choice. Either the Yemenis and the Iraqis bomb the hell out of their oil facilities to stop the trade and bring down European economy and force them to pull out of this war, or they will have to close this tap themselves and say, hey, we're refusing to sell our oil to the West until this genocide ends. So no matter what happens, the Saudis' oil and the Gulf oil and gas will cease to go to the West if this war breaks out on full scale, either because those facilities are targeted by the resistance and or that these governments, out of fear for their own self and their own facilities, will close the tap. And we're getting to a point. I heard somebody, I don't remember who was it from the U.S. government that was talking that the tensions are higher than 1967 and 1973. And remember, those are the days when the oil embargo came by the Gulf countries, and King Faisal of Saudi Arabia was immediately assassinated after that by the West, and removed from power. But the elite in these countries are not comfortable at all. They don't feel safe. They don't think that the U.S. and Israel can protect them, and they don't know when their own populace is going to rise against them, and or Axis of Resistance members target them and their wealth in response to their collaboration.
Wow. Well, let's talk about Iraq, the politics in Iraq. It's interesting because there's very, very angry people in Iraq over U.S. attacks. There's angry military people, and the leadership of Iraq is having different difficulties holding up the tide. What do we need to know about the political and the military dynamics in Iraq?
The U.S. After its invasion created a sectarian constitution and a sectarian parliament, copied kind of the ills of Lebanon that the French left here. So while clearly the military is pushing for the expulsion of American troops, they had a meeting at the Parliament of Iraq this week to vote on expulsion of American troops. And the Sunni and Kurdish bloc just didn't come to the meeting. So although there was quorum and the vote passed, it's very hard to say that this represents the Iraqi population. But at the same time, the realities on the ground are pushing for this expulsion of American troops. We already heard that the Prime Minister received a offer from the Americans saying that within 90 days, all of the international, quote unquote, international coalition will leave Iraq. Now, the resistance and the Iraqi military, their interest is for the Americans to leave now, not 90 days from now, you know. And I mean, I think it would be better for the Americans themselves to leave right now, because if a regional war breaks out and they're still in there, they're going to be sitting ducks, and we will see tens of and hundreds of American soldiers coming back in coffins. But what we see is that it seems like the American elite don't care about their own soldiers.
Well, yeah, guarantee. Yeah, everybody's
like Netanyahu doesn't care about the quote-unquote captives in Gaza. They have a political agenda, and they're willing to spill as much blood, their own people's blood, for it just to stay in power.
You know, when this is all said and done, I don't see how the U.S. is not ejected from the region. I don't see how the U.S. stays in the region after that. Israel, to me, will not be, if anything exists, it won't be what it is today, because, I mean, it's going to lose the war. Its population is going to fall apart. Afterwards, all of the a significant amount of these Israelis have dual citizenship. Why would they come back to what's going to be a failed state? Moody's just downgraded their economy. So if their economy's bad now, my God, what's it going to be after a regional war when none of their neighbors will do business with them anymore? And countries all over the world, when this is over, there's countries all over the world that say, I'm not buying anything from Israel. I'm not investing. I'm not going to do anything. Notwithstanding the outcome of this war, the fact that Israel is now a pariah state worldwide means it's nothing but a welfare state. The U.S. will have to support everything. And the U.S. is $34 trillion in debt.
Yeah, I mean, I saw videos this week of European activists going into supermarkets and throwing all Israeli products in trolleys and then, stomping them and destroying them. And, this is going to happen everywhere. That's if there is going to be continued trade in these countries with Israel. But look, the end of Israel is already foretold. Question is, how violent is this end going to be? There's no way to return to the status quo. There's no way that Zionism could be pitched in Western media as a good thing anymore. Anybody that didn't know the word Zionism now knows what the word Zionism is. This Holocaust industry and the anti-Semitism accusations are all now useless. And close to 2 million Israelis already left to Europe and the United States and Canada. So that's like 30% of the population of Israel already left the Zionist colony. And more, those who are staying are the most crazy fanatics, okay? So it's actually driving us closer to Armageddon, as these freaks want, than before. So the chances of the Zionist elite retreating is becoming less and less as this exit of anybody who's not totally crazy from Israel happens. I think that I wish that the Zionists just accept equality with the Palestinian indigenous population, and that we can have a secular democratic state for all who live in the land of Palestine, like in South Africa. I wish we can do that. We've been calling for this as Palestinians since 1948. But it seems that the elite in Israel are not going to accept what happened in South Africa, and therefore it's going to be a zero-sum game. And as we see, the Zionists believe that they can genocide all the Palestinian population and not have any consequence come at them from the West. And this is why the axis of resistance will be the one that is defending the Palestinian people and fighting for their liberation.
Well, it seems to me that the foundation of Zionism, as it were, if I had to narrow it down, is Jewish people around the world are not safe because of anti-Semitism, and people could get them, and it's scary, and they could be killed, and things like that, and the Holocaust part too. So therefore, they should all come to Israel where it's safe and where they can have their own land and culture, and God gave them all that kind of stuff. So the foundation of Israel is one of safety for Jewish people worldwide. You can all come here. That dog ain't hunting no more. That ship has done sailed because of the actions of Israel, because of the antagonizing the people and the communities around them. It can't be safe anymore. So even if the war ends and things get rebuilt, that concept of safety, the foundation that they argued, is all over. Which means, if you have a store and you say, come here because we have the lowest prices, and you have the lowest prices and people come there, and then one day you quadruple your prices, you're going to close down. The foundation of your store is based on low prices. You lose that, you no longer have a store. They now have, by their own hand, demolished any thought that anybody would have of safety. So, and might I add this, and I see this in here, a lot of Jewish people are looking at Israel with, they're aghast. A lot of the Jewish people in this country are like, my God, what am I looking at here? They see fascism, they see violence, everything that Israel claimed to stand for, good, God, doing God's work, safety for their people. All of those have been blown out of the water. So whatever is left there can never be any hint of what they claimed that they were building or that they had, Laith.
Yeah, I mean, the myth that they try to create, this idea that Israel is a response to the Holocaust or anti-Semitism, anti-Jewish pogroms in Russia in the late 1800s. Of course, these are all myths. They're not real. The majority of Jewish people during the Holocaust and during the pogroms in Russia were anti-Zionist. We have to remember the Bund, the courageous Jewish fighters that fought off the Nazis and slowed the invasion of Russia. Without these the Jewish warriors that fought in the battles of Ukraine in World War II, the Nazis would have had an easier time to invade Russia and occupy Moscow. There's no way you can claim to be Jewish and at the same time claim to be Zionist. Of course, Prophet Moses gave us the 10 Commandments. Don't kill, don't steal, don't covet your neighbor's things. And Prophet Moses was a Unitarian, just like Abraham, who said all of us come from one father and one mother, and we're all one humanity. And the Zionists are telling you, kill Palestinians, steal Palestinian land, covet what the Palestinian has. It is the antithesis of the 10 Commandments and Moses' oneness. And in fact, it's a religion that calls for implementation of the 7 sins so this is what Zionism is. It's the antithesis of Judaism. So anybody that uses Judaism as a tool to have a Zionist state is actually calling for supremacy, the opposite of the oneness that Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad taught us. The other myth that somehow European converts to Judaism have a blood purity that was maintained through 4,000 years that is higher quantity of blood quantum than the Palestinian indigenous people is, again, it's pseudoscience. It's the same language we hear from white supremacists and Nazis about purity of blood and Aryan blood this and Aryan blood that. So there's no argument that you can put forward to justify Zionism and the creation of this colony that is not supremacist. There isn't, and they will try to divert about this. Of course, ultimately, your question was about the Zionist colony being now, is it safe for Jews? Well, it is definitely the most unsafe place for Jewish people anywhere on this planet, and they better, if they want to stay in Palestine, they better accept equality, and then they will be safe, or they can pack up their bags, maintain their supremacy, and go to New York or Toronto or London or Paris, where their supremacy is still guaranteed by those governments.
Another thing too, and I think it's important to have these kinds of philosophical talks, and that is, look, for my entire lifetime, when people said the Holocaust, people thought of the Nazi death camps, and certainly horrible, terrible thing. We don't and never want to belittle the memory of Holocausts of groups of people, right? I think that what's the genocide in Palestine has taken the strength off of that argument, right? The strength off of that concern that people had. And now what I hear, because the Netanyahu and his people have issues with, let's say, the Russians, and the Russians are saying, wait a minute, we lost 27 million people. You know what I mean? We got our Holocaust, 27 million people. The Chinese are sitting over there saying, we lost 20 million people to Japanese imperialism, right? Indigenous people in Australia and the US and what have you are saying, whoa, black people, hey, what about the slave trade? Let's not forget how many people died in the Atlantic crossing. We're hearing the Africans, point and saying, for God's sake, we want to talk about genocides, the Algerians, so what you have now, for God's sake, the Indians, for 190 years of British occupation, estimated 50 to 60 million people holocausted by the UK. So I think what's happening is the fact that they're involved in a genocide. The Zionism is involved in a genocide. And then the Zionists tried to come out to the court when they were accused of genocide. And as I say, Zionism is not Judaism. Joe Biden's a Zionist. He's not Jewish. So the Zionists went to try to excuse their genocide using the Holocaust. And I think all of these other groups, from black people in America to indigenous people in Australia to the Russians and the Africans and the Indians, all said, time out here. You're being accused of genocide by an African country that suffered apartheid and all kinds of terrible genocides. And you're going to use genocide as though you're the only ones. I think the strength of the genocide argument from World War II has the Zionists, Jewish people, certainly, but the Zionists using that as an excuse for their nefarious deeds, misdeeds, and military misadventures. That day is gone. And other people are starting to say, we need to talk about how the hell we were genocided most of the time by some European colonial imperial power, about 99% of the time. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to say something that probably very few people will ever say. Zionism is not only responsible for the genocide in Palestine since 1948, but Zionism is also responsible for the rise of the Nazis. The Zionists are responsible and culprit in the Holocaust. How? How would we say this? Why would I say this? Everybody knows the Balfour Declaration, where Minister of Foreign Affairs of the UK, Lord Balfour, wrote a letter saying that they will allow the creation of a Jewish state in the land of Palestine. What people don't understand is who this letter was written to. This letter, the Balfour Declaration, was written to Lord Rothschild of Germany, the richest and biggest industrialist in Germany during World War I. Why did he receive a letter from Lord Balfour promising the creation of the Zionist colony? Because Lord Rothschild came in the middle of World War World War I. The British were at the edge of bankruptcy. They were losing the war against the Austro-Hungarians and the Ottoman Empire. And so Lord Rothschild, who's a German citizen, his family is one of the only ones that were given Lord title as Jewish Germans, went to Lord Balfour and said, if the British Empire promises us Palestine as a land that we can colonize to have a quote-unquote Jewish state, I will withdraw all my money, along with many of the other Zionist industrialists in Germany, will withdraw our money from the German economy, close our factories, and collapse the German Austro-Hungarian economy. And that's what they did. So the Austro-Hungarians lost World War I because the Zionists destroyed their economy in return for the Balfour Declaration and the creation of the Zionist colony. And what did this humiliation of Germany at the hands of the Zionists lead to? It led to the rise of the Nazis, who said, well, these Jewish German elite went and betrayed us, destroyed our economy, and supported the British, and said that they will be leaving to the Zionists, to Palestine. So clearly, they are enemies of the Germans. This is what the Nazis said. Doesn't mean that the Jewish people were actually.
Right.
This is the elites within the majority of Jewish Germans refused Zionism. They all believe that they are Germans, including Einstein and others, and they said they are Germans, okay? But the Zionists put them in this situation. They led us to the rise. Zionism led to the rise of the Nazis. And the crimes that the Nazis committed wouldn't have happened if there was no Zionism, okay? They wouldn't have even existed. So the Zionists are responsible for the Holocaust as much as the Nazis are, and they are responsible for the current genocide happening in Palestine.
Well, let me add this in the United States right now, and I say this, this is a discussion I've had. My brother, who's passed away, God rest his soul, was Jewish. He converted when he was in the military, and we had these kinds of discussions, he and I, right? And one of the things that he just recently died a few months back, what we had discussed was, a concern that he had. And he said, look, my Jewish friends and I, we got big problems with Israel, right? With, what's happening, the Zionists and their, violence and violent policies, right? And he said this, there was a fear. He said, if I look at the Biden administration and heavily influenced, if you go all around by Zionists, Jewish Zionists, right? And he said, if you look at these Zionist billionaires in America, you look at all these Jewish people, regular people, and all of these Jewish people, and the masses of them say, we're not down with terrible things happening in the name of our religion. Zionism is not, there's certainly not that there's not some support for Israel in the Jewish community, but as you can see by what's happening in the street, a lot of Jewish people here in America are very peaceful people that happen to actually be like anti-war and things like that, right? Okay. He says, I have a fear that the Zionists will, I never thought about what you said, that their actions will infuriate people. And people will say, look what these Jewish people in the Biden administration are doing. not seeing them as Zionists, as just as Jewish people. He said, and then they'll come back at us and say, well, it's all your fault. That the Bidens with the Zionists will destroy the United States economy, destroy all of this stuff. And he said, and then the fear is that people come back to the working class Jewish regular old people and blame us when we don't agree with the Zionists, that they will look at the Zionists in Europe, in Israel, and blame us. Is exactly what you're saying. That a minority of very powerful Zionists Zionism to me is just another version, another flavor of fascism. But then they come back and then they blame the regular old Jewish guy walking down the street and his family who's minding his own business, trying to make a living and feed his family. That sounds exactly what you're saying, where the elite ruling class take action, Zionists take actions that the everyday Jewish person on the street who's just a working class guy or a regular person suffers for when they don't even agree with those actions.
Yeah, I am personally scared for the Jewish population in the West at the end of this war, especially if we have the bigger regional war and the United States is defeated and its economy collapses and the rest of the world boycotts and from trade with the West. Okay, and suddenly all these economies collapse, mass poverty happens, and then of course fascism rises, and then you have people saying, well, the Jews destroyed America, right?
Exactly.
And that's a very scary moment. I personally, if I am Jewish American, I would be going to occupy AIPAC. I will be going to occupy the synagogues that are pitching Jewish supremacy, Zionism. I will be going to do that instead of occupying, Central, Station, whatever. Jewish people that are anti-Zionist have to now direct their actions against Zionist organizations that are usurping their name and usurping their religion to protect themselves, not only to support Palestine. If they're not able to defeat these Zionist organizations, unfortunately, the Jewish population as a whole in the West will be blamed for the collapse of Western imperialism. Okay, this is an urgent call to our Jewish comrades that are anti-Zionist to direct their attention towards these Zionist organizations, so the world and their brethren in the United States that are not Jewish can see that they are against fully these organizations.
Let me go one further. These same Christian Zionists in America who are all, we love the Jews, when in fact, they want Israel to come together so that in their, twisted minds, God comes back and then the Israelis can all become either Christians or get wiped out. I always say with friends like that, who needs enemies, right? So these same people, we are Christian Zionists, we support Israel no matter what, will be the very ones, the first ones that turn on them. People like you and I, who are people of peace, will be standing there in front of them saying, hey man, no, these are our friends, these are our brothers. They didn't do anything wrong. It was the ruling elite. I see politics through the lens of political class. And I'm like, come on, man, these are just working people. Let's protect these people. We'll be standing there. The ones that the Zionists hate the most will be the ones saying, look, can we protect the Jewish population? The same so-called Christian Zionists who claim they love Israel will be their very worst enemy, the ones that we will have to protect them from. Your thoughts?
Yeah, look at Christianity and how some people abused it. This is a religion from Palestine, Jesus of Nazareth, the peace and love prophet, and some people desecrated his name and did genocide in his name in the Americas and Oceania and enslaved whole nations in Africa in his name, in the name of the prophet of love. Similarly, look at what the Wahhabi cult did in the name of Muhammad and the religion of peace. That's what Islam means, to peacefully surrender to the oneness of humanity and God. So we, even somebody like me who is, secular in outlook, we have to try to remind people that want to speak in the name of these religions actually about the philosophical roots of those religions that are about oneness and coming together and equality and justice. So we should never allow neither Jewish Zionists or Christian Zionists to speak in the name of those religions. We should challenge them always, and liberate these prophets and their heritage from these genocidal maniacs.
Yeah, because it always comes back to the ruling elite versus the masses. That's what it comes back to. The people, the Newlands and the Sullivans and the Blinkens. Blinken. Look at this guy. He went to the finest of schools, and he, never worked a day in his life. Never knew what it's like to cut a blade of grass. You know what I mean? This guy is the ruling elite, and it's the ruling elite who throw the masses, into the fire. So I think it is important for people to understand that dynamic. The last thing I'll ask you, I think, is before we go, is about Yemen. The status of what's going on there, what Yemen's place would be. And I tend to think this. Let me add this. I think that Yemen's firing missiles and things like that, and people are saying, well, they're not hitting ships. I don't think they're really trying. They're hitting ships here and there with smaller missiles and drones. I don't think they're throwing heavy punches. I think these are kind of brushback blows. This is kind of get off my back. I could do worse. I feel like Yemen probably has some really nasty missiles, that they have a lot more stuff, that in the event that things went bad, that Yemen could brandish far more powerful weaponry than they have, but they're pulling their punches right now until such time as they need to. Your thoughts?
You're 100% correct. You see, like what they needed to do was just fire a few crackers beside a few ships, trade ships, and that led to everybody turning around and never going through Bab el-Mandeb. And only when it was clear that the United States and the UK specifically are sending on purpose ships to challenge that blockade did they start hitting those trade ships. And only when the UK attempted to escort those ships with military escort destroyers around them did they hit the British ships. So you see, they don't really need to go full out and sink any ships right now, because the ultimate goal of what they were doing was to put attention on the blockade on Gaza, put pressure on the Western economies to get those elite to force Israel to open the entrance of aid to Gaza. Now, in the case of a full-out war, the Yemeni resistance has ballistic missiles, cruise missiles. They have drone ships. They have drone submarines that will be used, and they will be sinking destroyers, frigates, and even aircraft carriers if they have the chance to. And I think the United States is putting itself and its own troops in such a dangerous situation, playing this game with Yemen, and look at Yemen has the support of the whole world behind them. I think all the rich on earth, they see Yemen now as their representative.
I've even got my own hat, and people are like, always, I wear my hat doing my show, and people say, "Hey, where can I get one of those hats? You got to sell me one of those hats." So
I
you
love
are
it.
correct. Yeah, you are correct. All right, Laith Maruf, thanks a lot. And you got a website or something that you could recommend people to go to?
Yes, you can go to freepalestine.video. Please help us donate so we can continue this work, training the youth here in Lebanon to produce content in English, to show you what's happening in the country. And, freepalestine.video, you can also send us content if you want us to air it there. Join us, send us donations, please.
All right. Thanks a lot, Latham Roof. I certainly appreciate it. And everyone, don't forget, all 1,075 people who are watching, that means 1,075 people. We need to have at least 1,075 likes. So smash the like button. Make sure you share this. Telegram, Twitter, everywhere. Share this on all your social media platforms. It's important that people hear these kinds of conversations to get updated and to get some alternate philosophical perspectives. Thank you. We're out.